All right, so to start off, my name is Richard James Cook, and today we're going to be talking about surviving indie. And this is something that I've been kind of passing the message around for a while because I have a lot of years put in not really getting too far with my career on the AAA side, even though not for lack of trying. And I've certainly had a lot of experiences where I've learned to grow my networks organically. I've learned to grow my skills organically and things like that. And I think it's very valuable for everybody to learn whenever they're going through this, especially things like failure. Failure is something we don't put enough emphasis on because failure is important. It helps you learn about yourself. So, all right. I will start out with this. So I grew up in a city called Wichita, Kansas. If y'all don't know where it is, it's okay, because it's kind of like hidden in the southeast corner of Kansas. It is an actual city, but not a lot of people know it's there because they don't have much for them going on like creative culture and things like that. It's an industrial city. It's an aircraft city. And I didn't want to do any of those things. So I kind of just got the hell out of there as fast as I possibly could because I wanted to do film. I wanted to do video games. I wanted to act. I wanted to do music, all this stuff. And I just did not see a path going forward with staying in that city. I had to go somewhere else where I could blossom as a creator. So I started in 2003 in Full Sail. If you guys don't know what that is, it's a school down in Orlando, Florida, technically Winter Park. And I started there as a computer animation major when they were still only offering associates and stuff like that. And people know them now for their bachelor's and master's programs and things like that. I don't even think they offer associates anymore, but I started out on Autodesk or Alias Maya when it was still Alias Maya 4.5 when I was going into computer animation there because I wanted to work in 3D in some way. I've always been fascinated with 3D. I used to steal the little demo discs out of PC Gamer and in the grocery store and just like be completely fascinated and study all the things that and all the applications that came on the disc. So it was always something I was in love with. I'm not a great 2D artist, so 3D kind of takes care of the depth perception part for you. And that's why I got into 3D. But I started there and I used to I used to model in NURBS. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with NURBS. It's kind of a bit of an outdated concept now, but that's kind of what I left there knowing. I didn't know a whole lot when I left there because to say I was 18 at the time. To say I left there, I was young and stupid, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I went there. I was completely fascinated with everything, but I left not knowing as much as I should have. So that was that. And so whenever I kind of came back around into it in 2007, whenever I kind of got the bug again. So I was exploring for a while. I was doing music exploring. I was exploring filmmaking and things like that in the hiatus between 2005 and 2007. And I just got the game dev bug again. I didn't know what it was, but again, technology has always fascinated me in some way. Art has always fascinated me, so I wanted to combine the two and go back into the industry in some way. Sorry, I got my cards up here. All right, so I downloaded Maya 2008 and I was just tinkering again. I was trying to figure out, because again, I knew NURBS, and nobody uses NURBS anymore. And even when I went to Full Sail, it was pre-ZBrush era, and ZBrush is such a standard now in the industry. You have to know it if you want to get into the 3D industry. So I downloaded Maya and I started tinkering again. And these were some of my first models, and you can clearly see that it wasn't really great. So it took a long time. You build up your skills and you refine all the things that you know, and you join communities. Like I was part of Game Artisans and Polycount back in the day, taking part in competitions like Dominance War and Unearthly Challenge and all those, because it helps refine your skills because you get the feedback from the community. So I think the communities are very important too whenever it comes to building yourself as a creator. So over the years I got a little bit better, and my skills. I taught myself ZBrush. I even eventually started teaching ZBrush. I authored a tutorial series on a YouTube channel that I run, and it's like somewhere upwards of like 800,000 views now. It was one of the first 10 video tutorial series that I had really seen that was, for one, it was free to people. That was a very important thing, because we're all struggling indies. We're all trying to learn what we can and pull from the resources we can. And I was just looking for a resume booster. So I did it. I put it out there, and I'm really glad it has helped a lot of the people that it has. I get comments all the time telling me like, thank you so much for this stuff, which is very humbling for me, because I was just doing it as a resume thing. It's like, yeah. So I'm really glad that stuff helped out people. But this is my art circa 2012, and then things changed after that. So I submitted to pretty much every studio I could whenever I was getting back into it, and I just did not get anywhere. I never even got an art test. I've never in my entire career, I've never gotten an art test at a studio. I've never gotten an interview. And it's not for lack of trying. I seriously have like this inbox just completely full of rejection emails from every studio. And that can be really disheartening sometimes. This is what you want to do with your life. You want to get in somewhere and be able to build yourself up. And nobody would take me. Like I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. I just had no idea. So I joined an indie team in 2012 because I was looking for an outlet to be able to build games anyway and not have to say, oh, I'm just going to beef up my portfolio and try to get in a AAA studio. I have to create something. Like I have to have a ship title or something like that on my resume. So I joined an indie team in 2011 called Adaptive Elite. And we made this little game called 30 Minutes or Less. It was a top-down car delivery pizza driver game. I don't really know how to explain it. But it was quite the process, I can certainly say, where I came into this team as a 3D artist and basically revamped all their art, because their old 3D artist was just not great. And I kind of came in and did all that stuff, and we got to the point to where we wanted to start marketing the title and see if anyone was interested in covering it or whatever. And so I started getting into the marketing side of things. I started looking at I can reach out to these people who can cover it and stuff like that, because nobody else on the team wanted to do it for some reason. They just wanted to work on the game, but I was really interested in making a name for us as a studio. And I reached out to magazines and all this stuff. I reached out to a magazine in the Netherlands. I'm not sure if you guys might know it or not. It's called I for Games, and it used to be around. I think they're going through a transition right now, being built up into a new thing. But we had a deadline with them of August in 2012 to release our game so that they could do this big exclusive feature on us and all this stuff, and we completely missed it. Yeah, we built it up and down to the wire, down to the last minute, and we released it as a broken game. And I think I just had this moment of clarity going, why did we take this long to screw this up, And we released it to one of the gallery websites where you just pick a game on an app or whatever, like a browser game website and all that. And then it was kind of done with that. I was like, let's just move on to the next project. We learned our lesson from this. Let's just move on to the next project. So, all right, get my cards here. All right, here we go. So the next game we worked on, if you guys were in the indie sphere in 2013, you might have heard of this because I was just pushing it so hard on the forums, like indie game dev forums on Facebook and stuff. Progenitor, please. And this one kind of came out of this really weird circumstance where me and the creative director of the studio at Adaptive Elite were just sitting up late one night, he was on a random name generator online. It was spitting out 3 random words. And we were doing this like Hollywood style pitch meeting, like, oh, I have an idea for this. Oh, I have an idea for this. You know? And we came up with a whole bunch of different stuff. And whenever it spit out Progenitor Police, I was instantly like, oh my God, that's my baby. That's the one I want to do. And it turned out to be this really engrossing thing where I wanted to reinvent my childhood. I wanted that Contra bullet hell type of game with the ridiculous 90s looking animation and all this stuff. And we got to work on it, you know, and I took a back seat on this just because I'm a 3D artist. And so I started having to go, well, how can I benefit this project? How can I supplement this project with my skill sets? Because I don't have a skill set in anything else at that point. And so I started being a creative director. I started being a producer, a marketer, just out of necessity. And this is another thing that kind of just grows organically out of, you know, the people that you meet and the projects that you work on. You come to do other things because you have to. You have to create somehow, but, you know, you have to. So yeah, again, this was Zbrush Basics. This is that tutorial series I told you about. Because during the whole time I was working on Progenitor Police, I was branching out and doing other things because I discovered I could do other things and not have to be too limited by one team or one project. So I did that, and yeah, that was the first video that I'll move forward here. And I was doing other things at the time too. I was filming dev diaries and things like that. And during that time, I was also working on my first documentary, because the dev documentary stuff started to kind of tickle my creative fancy in terms of filmmaking. And I was making the film about our experience making Progenitor Police. So we were going to PAX East in 2013 and to exhibit the game, and that was a trip because, again, it was down to the wire. We didn't know what we were going to do. We got to like the last 2 hours, I think, before we were on the floor, and we still had a broken build. And so you're sitting there, you're freaking out, but I'm capturing all this stuff on camera because I felt those experiences were worth it to capture. Yeah, so I filmed the entire thing on a Galaxy S3 phone. And this is what I'm talking about when it comes to necessity. You just do what you can with the resources around you. I think that's one important thing any indie needs to learn, is that we worry so much sometimes about what equipment we have, what money we have, what resources we have. But the creation is really just, it sounds so tacky, but the creation is within you. It's you who has the ability to push forward and find anything you possibly can to create what you want to create. And that's what I did with the movie. I felt like it was crap, honestly, like quality-wise. I was like, audio, video, all that. And so I put it on YouTube for free because of that exact reason. I was like, I'm not going to charge anybody for this. And it's currently sitting at 95,000 views, which I'm pretty happy about. So I put it out there not knowing what to expect. I was really weary about it, and justifyingly so. The comments started flowing in, and I think you can imagine some of the vitriol that might have flowed in from that. A lot of people would come at me in this way, like, "Oh, you're just whining, like you're just being a depressed indie," you know, and that was initially hard for me to cope with because I don't think a lot of people actually understand depression as it truly is. It's one of those things where sometimes I would not be able to get out of my bed in the morning, and I would do that for like 3 or 4 days straight, and I didn't want to work with anybody, I didn't want to do anything because you feel like you're the only person going through it. That's what depression actually does to you. And that was pretty well emphasized in the movie. So I think a lot of people might have latched onto that and seen it in a negative light, because a lot of people were saying to me, "Oh, it's not like that. You know, indie's not like that. working a day job. I'm doing great. I'm working on my own games. Like, okay, good for you. Like, that's great. I'm really happy that you're doing your own thing and you're doing it successfully. But only I kind of know what I was feeling when I was shooting that stuff, when I was going through those things. And seeing it from the other side, seeing it from an outside window is going to draw some different interpretations from people. But I can really, truly say that it was a struggle. And trying to convey that to people was an even bigger struggle. But I got through it, because eventually you just realize that you're going to live your own experiences more so than anybody else is going to live anything. And nobody's ever going to understand that. So you just have to keep doing that and don't let any of that stuff faze you. So let's see where I'm getting to the next part here. So back to Progenitor, please. I worked on that game for like 2 years with the team, which was absurd. There's no reason that a side-scroller game in Flash, in HTML5 rather, should take that long to work on. And it became a system of accountability where there was none with my team. It was me and the artists who were pretty much pulling most of the weight on creating the art, designing the levels. I was reaching out to publications, all kinds of, I was really pushing it. And one other guy was working on music, and one guy was pseudo working on programming. And when I say he was pseudo working on programming, for instance, the thing it came down to was a 6-week window. We had been working on the game for that long. We needed it to be done. It was 90% done art-wise. It just needed AI and some other stuff done on maybe 4 bosses. So we got down to 6 weeks, said, how long is it going to take to finish this game? We need to figure this out. We all sat together, how long is it going to take to figure out to finish this game? And then we agreed on 6 weeks. We agreed on, I think, October 13th, 2013 or something like that. And all agreed on it, got off the conference call, and then the programmer disappeared. Just gone. And then he shows back up 2 weeks before the release window and starts working. So you can kind of see this, again, this system of accountability that wasn't there. And it's hard whenever you're not getting paid, when nobody's getting paid. I know that. I'm very aware of that. But I spent so much of my energy on that project convincing people that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, more so than I was actually working on the project. And so that was very stressful for me. And we got down to it again, completely missed our window. And I have a trailer out there that says the game is coming on this date. And I showed everybody that trailer. And I was so hyped about it. And then it completely missed it. So here comes the depression again. I lost it when that happened, because we had been working on that game for so long, and to see it come up completely nothing was, after multiple attempts, by the by. This was not the first attempt we tried to release it. To see it come up time and time again, just bad, it threw me under depression again, and I started going, I need accountability. I need something. And I left the project. It was my baby, and I left the project because I did not see it ever getting done with that team. And unfortunately, the team was part of a company that was an LLC, so they own the IP. I can't go off and make the game myself or anything like that. Otherwise, it would have been done by now, I promise. But accountability is so important. And I think whenever we're all in this together, and nobody's getting paid, you just have to remember that the reasons why you're doing it, the passion, the reasons why you're designing and creating, because you want to do it. You want to be here no matter what. And I think that's important for all teams to remember whenever they're, so hopefully something like this doesn't happen to them. So I started working on another project. Another movie. It wouldn't be a video game project this time. I think I had had my fill of that for 2 years, and I was just ready to create something somehow. And I didn't know how to program, so I decided to do a movie again because I knew how to do everything in movie stuff. Like, I knew how to edit, produce, direct, all that stuff. and I started working on a new project. I went to GDC in 2014 to film, and got like 16 or 17 interviews out there with a whole bunch of people like Adam Sessler and Kelly Santiago and all of them. And that movie would be called Pixel Poetry. And I started working on that again in 2013, October, right after that project failed. And worked on that for maybe about 3 months or something like that. So the way it started was I went down to Dallas initially to film some initial footage because I'm a real show me, don't tell me type of person. Like, I want to show you something feasible, something physical, before I try to explain an idea, because I'm not really great at explaining ideas. So I went down to Dallas initially in October and shot some initial footage, and I was thinking about who do I want to interview for this. I want, the movie's about how games are perceived as a creative medium in the 21st century, and how they're not just seen as an entertainment product anymore. The experiences they can bring for you and the things they can do are so much more than what we ever perceived them to be. Who can speak on this stuff? So I started reaching out to just as many people as I possibly could. And one of the first people I reached out to was a guy named Patrick Scott Patterson. And he was still doing his break-in to the industry at the time. And he had a good following, but he was still kind of at the humble beginnings of his video game career as a personality. And he had been building a network out there in Dallas because that's where he lived. And I reached out to him, and he connected me with these two guys. In addition to him, Chris Wiseman and David Eddings. If you don't know Chris, he's also known as Captain Redbeard on GameStop TV. So you might have seen him in the stores. And David Eddings is the voice of Claptrap in Borderlands. So Scott knew both of these guys from the local Dallas area because Gearbox is in Dallas. And he connected me with them, and I got to interview Scott and Chris. Unfortunately, David had gotten very sick around that time, and he was in the hospital, and so I missed my interview with him. But eventually I did get, at GDC, I got to interview him, which was great. So I started figuring out, what do I want to do with this film? It started out as what I called the games as art film. And I was like, okay, this is going to be about games as art. Well, here's the problem. About a year before that, the Supreme Court had decided games were art. It was already put to rest. It was done, everybody decided it was art. Nobody's arguing about this anymore. And so I got an article posted on Destructoid about the movie and started discussing with the comments and the people in the comments and stuff like that about this. And I realized very quickly that this was not something people were really arguing about anymore. We've all come to terms with it. And so it helped me grow the movie into a whole different kind of perspective, which became how games are perceived, and not so much just games as art. We're talking about from the perspective of indies, from the perspective of games as art, from the perspective of violence in games. I kind of wanted to run the gamut and see what I could help explain to people who do not understand this stuff. People outside of games who really are interested in the experiences they can bring. I want them to see this movie and say, oh yeah, I didn't know games could do that, And that was eventually what the film became. So, February of 2013, actually January rather, of 2014, yes. I ran an Indiegogo for the movie, and it just failed miserably. And I'll show you that here in a second. So after that happened, I kind of well, how the hell do I need to finish this movie. It's not going to get finished, by itself. I'm just sitting on my butt in Wichita, And so I reached out to a marketing friend in California who put me in touch with another marketing friend who put me in touch with the operations guy for Devolver Digital. And you guys, I hope you know Devolver Digital. Hotline Miami, Broforce just recently entered the Gungeon. And the ops guy from Devolver Digital was like, and remember, this was after the failed Indiegogo, or actually it was right in the middle of it, but the ops guy from Devolver Digital was like, oh my God, this is great, because I showed him the trailer. He's like, oh my God, this is great. I want to sign it. And I'm like, great, I don't have a movie yet. It's not done, you know? So I had to go back and try to find all these different ways to try to fund it. It just never happened. I don't know anything about asking people for money. I don't know anything about, finding investors and things like that. Fortunately, I've had other people who've been helping me with that recently because I just don't have the experience in that. But when I went back to the ops guy at Devolver, he put me in touch with a guy named Mike Wilson. And Mike had told me that they had just started Devolver Digital Films the year before. And a lot of people don't know Devolver Digital Films actually exists. It's their film site, and they actually have like 25 films or so signed to it. So, so I kind of just sat there in front of Mike going, this is only going to get made if I get a little bit of help money-wise. GDC's coming up. I need to go out there and film. I could do that because everybody's in the same place. And he said, okay, well, let me talk to the game side. It's a games film. It might work out, might not, we don't usually sign unfinished projects. That's basically what he told me. So I kind of twiddled my thumbs for a bit, trying to think, this doesn't work out? What if this doesn't happen? And came back to me. I think I remember specifically, I was sitting at a bar, I was just drinking and like wondering what the hell was going to happen next. And he sent me an email back and said they were going to advance me $2,500 to help with the film, and they were going to sign the film. So $2,500 is not a lot of money, clearly, but I said, whoa, I can do this. I have to do this. Like, this is something, something. And again, going back to the Indiegogo, I was going for $10,000. I raised $243. I don't think I need to tell anybody who's ever tried Kickstarter, Indiegogo, that it's very hard. It's quite the journey to try to make that work out. So, all right. I'll go forward a little bit here. So he gave me the $2,500. Let's see if I can come up with that. Yeah, there's the email from Mike. He gave me the $2,500, and we signed the agreement, and it was on. And I was ecstatic, but I was so stressed out because all of a sudden I'm working with a publisher, and I've never done this before, and I'm using their money, so I got to be careful. So I took that and I went out to San Francisco to GDC, and that money kind of went away pretty fast. I can't explain how exactly I can't emphasize how much travel really takes a bite out of your funds. And anybody who's ever done any of that, gone to events to try to show their games, I'm sure you understand. But it disappeared pretty fast. So at the end of it, I had 17 interviews, though. I was really happy with the footage that I pulled. And I basically started pouring in the sweat equity from that point. So I worked on it for 6 months and eventually got it done by myself. Just a lot of nights sitting there going, how is this shot going to come together? How are these things going to come together? So that happened, and we were ready to release the film. So during the film, and there's a render shot. That was the final render, I think, right before. And we released on GOG.com as part of their first film lineup, which was pretty cool. Eventually, we reached number 2, which was really cool as well. And that happened. Yeah, so during the film, this is kind of, again, where things take a wild turn that I would have never expected. During the film, I was interviewing a guy named Warren Spector, who's also keynoting here later today. You guys should go to it. He was starting to run a fellowship at UT. Actually, by the way, let me rewind back. So Warren Spector, Deus Ex, Epic Mickey, all the coolest games. He's definitely a veteran of the industry, and he knows what he's talking about. He was running a program at the University of Texas at Austin, where I had gone down to interview him for the film called the Denny of Sam's Gaming Academy. Basically what it is a fellowship where they select 20 people. They pay you a stipend they pay you a $10,000 stipend to go there and learn under Warren Spector and all these industry leaders. It's crazy. It's awesome. Only selected 20 people for it. And when I was interviewing him months earlier for the film, after the interview, we kind of got to talking about my game development experience. And he's like, "Oh, you do development too?" I was like, "Yeah, I do. I do 3D art and I do all this other stuff." And he's like, "You should apply for the program." And I was like, "Okay, well, probably not going to happen, but I might do it, you know." So I went home and researched the program, and it was like $75 to apply for it. By the by, I was very broke at the time, so $75 was a lot of money to me. And I'm sitting there contemplating about it. It's 20 people they're only going to select. There's no freaking way he's going to select me. And I think it was with the encouragement of my mom that I actually went forward and I did it. And that's something too I can speak personally to, is that my mom has been the biggest supporter, because she's never asked me questions about why I do what I do. She trusts that I know what I'm doing, which is hugely important to me, because I've not had that same reaction from a lot of people otherwise. So anyway, so I applied and I got in. I don't know how I got in, but I got in. And coincidentally as well, my movie Pixel Poetry released the first day of class. So it was kind of like this really surreal moment for me that all kind of came together in one thing, which was really great. So one thing that has always been true is this: I must create no matter what. I went through the DSGA. I learned so much about project management and about leadership and about all these crazy things that they don't really teach you unless you like have firsthand experience. You go to a studio, you learn these things just through firsthand experience. It was typically stuff you didn't learn in academia. They didn't have a curriculum for that type of stuff. So it was quite the experience. I got out of the program still not really knowing if I wanted to do like film or games or whatever, because I was constantly working on projects. I did a web pilot series I did a making, of Pixel Poetry and all that stuff. And I still really love doing film stuff, but I missed doing game development stuff because it had been a while. And we did a student project in class, and it kind of reawoke that thing that I wanted to create more game development stuff. So I went through the whole process again. I got out of the DSGA and I started applying for AAA studios, and still nothing. I was sitting here watching my friends get jobs at Telltale and Gearbox, Vicarious Visions, EA, Blizzard, 2K, all that stuff. And somehow I still come out short. And I'm going, I have all this experience. Like, I don't have as much experience as I probably should, but I have all this experience doing all these things. Why won't anybody hire me? And it became that age-old thing. I think like a lot of creators ask themselves, where you're going, how do I get experience if I can't get experience? You know, it's a revolving door. And so couldn't figure out how to get past that. And I think at some point I started going, well, maybe I should just be an indie. Maybe I should just stay an indie, because nobody's going to hire me. And I can't not create. I have to create stuff. I can't sit here and lull over whether or not somebody's going to hire me. If something festers in my mind too long, it's going to bother me. It's really going to mess with me, and I have to do something about it, and I have to create something. So, so I chose I chose the indie life over the AAA life, basically, at that point. I said, okay, well, I'm going to have to make some sacrifices, but this is what I want to do with my life. I have to do this with my life. I won't be satisfied any other way. And started working with a partner with a studio in Austin there on a game where it was me and him, basically. It was just two of us, and it was a major studio in Austin, and they were going to pay us to work on their IP and stuff like that as an independent studio. And so I worked with him for 2 months on that, and eventually he cut me out of the email communications first, and then he cut me out of the deal and all the money that came along with it. And we were getting paid about $12,000 for that. And at the end of it, I only got $1,600. So that really punched me in the gut in terms of, again, we're going back to like accountability, and we're going back to trust. And it's so hard when those things happen to rebuild that, to be able to, when you build relationships with people like that, and then that kind of stuff happens and it falters, you don't know what to do. So in November, I became homeless. In a sense, I was sleeping in a friend's office, which was actually his office because he was making me pay rent for it. And I did that for 2 months. I slept on his couch. I had to basically eat out all the time because there was nowhere for me to cook. I had to get showers at the gym. So it was like, on his membership, it was like I could only go like 2 days a week or something like that. So, you know, we're talking, I don't like to downplay the idea too much, or I don't like to play it up too much, because there are people who have way worse than I do, and I'm very aware of that. But I was not in a situation where I wanted to be, and it felt like there was no getting out of that. So these are all the companies that my friends were getting jobs at and stuff like that. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going back through slides here. Yeah. All right, so, and this is going to be the last part of it. I'll just finish up my story. So after that happened, I went back home for a while, and I was floating a bit, and I was actually just recently in Dallas. I lived there for a little bit, and decided that I was just going to sacrifice everything to be out here talking to you, to go to PAX next is what I'm doing. I'm going to be talking up there and work on my stuff, because it is more important to me than anything else. I think that is a hard lesson that anybody shouldn't. I hope none of you have to learn it that way. I hope you thrive in your careers. And ultimately, it's just about creation to me. I can't not create, like I said. So I'm going to continue on this way, because hopefully, eventually, something will work out. And I've built a network over my time in my career. I built a network where I've started to get recognized at conventions and things like that by friends in the industry. And that's something you always thrive for. That's something you always strive for, is, just being able to walk into PAX and see your friends. That's the thing I look forward to the most whenever I go to these conventions now. And it's a long time coming. It started with guys like Patrick Scott Patterson, and now I know so many people across the industry just through organic networking. You do that stuff because you don't. Well, I'll kind of get to that in a second, actually. So, summing it up, kind of where I am now. I'm working on a new game project. I'm working on a new documentary. And my documentary is called Surviving Indie, which will be coming out way later this year. But it's about the same stuff. It's following myself, a couple other guys, Rami Ismail, Kelly Santiago, their stories, retrospectives. Jay Tholen, he made a game called Dropsy, if you aren't familiar. But I'm also working on games, and I'm starting to work on that with possibly with some local studios like Mighty Rabbit here in Raleigh. And it's kind of slowly building up to where it looks like something might actually happen soon. And so I'm looking back and I'm going, maybe it was all worth it. Like the sacrifices, maybe it was all worth it. Because I could be doing anything else in this career, and this is what I chose. And I've come full circle. I've become fully aware of the sacrifices that I made. I've become fully aware of the things that I have to do to keep moving forward in this industry and not thriving, because I'm not thriving, but surviving. So to sum it up to the lessons that I've kind of learned, you will be told no. You will be told no so many times by so many different people, publishers, other developers, team members, things like that. This is something you have to come into fully understanding that this is not the end all be all. This is not the end of your creative cycle. You know, there are so many different paths we can take. There are so many different ways we can get out of the no. But you will be told no, and you shouldn't fret. You shouldn't let it deter you. So yeah, this is my game, Super Combat Fighter, that I was talking about. I'm sorry, my slides are a little bit out of order, but Super Combat Fighter, which is kind of a throwback to original Mortal Kombat. It's like a little fun thing I wanted to do because it was my love letter to the 90s, rather. There's some behind the scenes shots, green screen. And then Surviving Indie, which is the new documentary. So yeah, so going back to the nobody says no, going into this, nobody walks the same path. My organic network has grown tremendously just from meeting people in the most casual settings. I have not gone up to somebody immediately like, here's my business card. You know, that's not the way you usually want to go about these things, because this is a small industry. We all know each other. To some extent, I'm not lying about that. Like, the industry is way smaller and way tighter than anybody can imagine, even though it looks way bigger from the outside. So build your relationships based on that. And again, nobody walks the same path. You're gonna fail projects. You're gonna succeed at some small things. You're gonna move forward on your own way, but don't try to replicate the successes of other people, because they walk their own path. You have to walk your own path. That's how you're gonna succeed in it. Never let your financial state control your creativity. I think that's very obvious to a lot of us, but I think it's hard sometimes whenever you're trying to wrap your mental state around that. You're sitting there going, I don't have enough money to do this. I don't have enough money to buy ads or go to the conventions to show my game. Don't let that control your creativity. Move forward with your creativity and continue, like I said, building your organic network. I think that's the most important thing. Enjoy the small successes. I remember being just as happy and excited about being featured in that tiny magazine with the first game as I was when I got my first panel at PAX South with Adam Sussler and all these people that had grown up watching and admired so much. You have to enjoy all the small successes, and don't just say, oh, I'm not going to make it until I get to this thing, or I'm not going to be well known until I get to this thing. You enjoy every small success. Enjoy every asset that's ever finished. Enjoy every blurb that's ever written about you or your game. Enjoy all of it. It's so important. Make friends, not acquaintances. That is probably one of the more important things. Again, going back to your organic network. In the casual settings and stuff like that, people will introduce you to other people. That's how I built my network mostly, was on the friendships of other people. Because when they see an opportunity to help somebody out who has clearly proven themselves, who has the skill and the talent, and they know this is a good bet, they're gonna refer you to somebody, and you're gonna become friends with that person, and then you're gonna become friends with the person's friends, and it just grows and grows and grows. But involve yourself in the community as much as possible. It will happen. It will happen organically. Go to events and just talk to people about what you love to talk about, game development. It grows organically. And this, to kind of sum it up, Rami Ismail, you all know who Rami Ismail is, don't you? He's always been a help to me in a lot of ways, where whenever I was down and he was kind of on the high wave, success, I wrote him an email a long time ago telling him, like, there's no way any of this stuff is going to happen for me. Like, what do I do? And he was extremely helpful in giving me moral support that got me out of that bind. So again, we're all in this together. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but we are really all in this together. This is our craft, and we have to make sure that we all, as a community, nurture that, and game development, and make sure we all help each other out, because that's the only way we're all going to be able to make this something that's not like Hollywood, something that's not like music. It's all cutthroat and business. There's certainly a sect of that in video games, but I think the indie community is the strongest sect of community in video games, and I want it to stay that way. So when it comes to your own career, Rami basically summed it up for me this way: it's not what if it doesn't happen, it's what if it does. And it's such a simple phrase, but it's so powerful, because you don't know what's going to happen next. I didn't know I was going to get into Warren Spector's class and learn under one of the greatest game developers, and I didn't know I was going to get signed by Devolver Digital. I didn't know all these things, but you push forward. You never say die. You just keep going, because that's what we do. And that's my talk. So thank you guys very much. I'm not sure if we have time for Q&A at all. Do we? Anybody want to ask questions? Anybody? Nope. All right. Disperse. Thank you all for coming, though, really.